Basically tied once Vice President Harris became the Democratic nominee just 3 months ago. And if you look at the latest national polls and those of the battleground states, it's basically tied now when you take into account the margin of error. That means this election will be won on turnout, which explains why former President Donald Trump is continually using fear and racism to scare his base voters to the polls, as he shamefully did once again in Aurora, Colorado last night.
It's the enemy from within, all the scum that we have to deal with that hate our country. That's a bigger enemy than China and Russia.
This election will be won on turnout, which explains why former President Barack Obama is doing everything he can to bolster support for Vice President Harris, and especially from a surprising group of voters, black men. You see, President Obama speaks sparingly, so when he does, as he did at a Harris campaign office in Pittsburgh on Thursday, it's for a reason and for a purpose. He told the staff and volunteers gathered for an African-American phone bank that reports of lagging enthusiasm, particularly among black men that he himself was hearing about from folks across the country, concerned him. Obama not only dove right into the misogyny of it all, he also gave them the rhetorical ammunition needed to beat back this nonsense.
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. And I think anybody you are talking to in a barbershop, anybody you are talking to in your house, in your family, at church, who is coming with that kind of attitude, I think you have to ask them, well, how can that be? Because the women in our lives have been getting our backs this entire time. They've been raising us and working and having our backs. And when we get in trouble and the system's not working for us, they're the ones who are out there marching and protesting. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable. That's not, this shouldn't even be a question.
And just how urgent this message is came this morning by way of a new New York Times poll of black voters. At 78%, Vice President Harris still enjoys overwhelming support, but that's down from the 90% President Biden won in 2020. And among black men, Harris stands at 70%, but that's down from Biden's 85% in 2020. The very idea that Donald Trump could pull in 20% of the black male vote, despite what he did to the Central Park Five and what he promises to do with a day of violence for the police and a return to the de facto racial profiling of stop and frisk, is mind-boggling. But I take it seriously because the race is tied. This election will be won on turnout. And in battleground states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, not one vote can be taken for granted. Joining me now, Michigan's Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist and Pennsylvania's Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. Governors, welcome to the Saturday Show. Thank you both very much for being here. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, let me start. This question is for both of you, but Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, let me start with you. Just give us the lay of the land in Michigan. What are you seeing on the ground? And is the race tied, or do you see the vice president actually with momentum at her back?
You know, Jonathan, I've literally been in every part of Michigan, both sides and both peninsulas, including in the city of Detroit. And the race is tied. And that's why we're so excited about the record level of volunteer energy we're seeing, because we need to have more conversations every single day. And we're going to make sure we get the resources to the state to do so, because make no mistake about it, the candidates are here, whether it's Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, but Donald Trump comes to Michigan and lies to the voters of Michigan every single time he gets here. He lies, he insults us. He insulted people in my city that I live in Detroit. He tried to start, his people tried to start a riot to stop the vote count in Detroit in 2020. It's how disrespectful he is. But, I know that our people are going to step up and stand tall. In Detroit, had the highest proportion of Black residents in the country. And I think that city's going to show up, because we got to make sure we go and reach everybody where they are.
Actually, before I get to you, Lieutenant Governor Austin, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, you mentioned Donald Trump and Detroit, and he was there in Detroit and insulted Detroit at the Detroit Economic Club. But here is what the Harris-Walz campaign did. They turned that around to a 1-minute ad, but here's about 10 seconds of it. Watch this.
And so what Donald Trump doesn't understand or care to learn is that when he said
Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president,
that he should be so damn lucky.
I mean, I love that ad, and I'm sad we had to bleep out the word there, but I think you can figure out what it said. How did that go over, what Donald Trump said to the Detroit Economic Club?
Look, again, being somebody from Detroit, an engineer from Detroit, a problem solver from Detroit, for him to have our city's name in his mouth in such a negative way was disgusting. And it landed just as flat and tone deaf as Donald Trump's hair is. I mean, the truth is, we are a city of people who make things happen, who build things. Like, I've built companies that solve problems. Donald Trump comes and lies and just talks about problems and has no solutions. But Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, these are the kinds of people who have solutions to help us build Black health and Black wealth, to build health and wealth all across America. And that's why they're going to win Michigan. And so,
Lieutenant Governor Austin, are you seeing the same thing in Pennsylvania that Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is seeing in Michigan? Is the race tied, or is the vice president ahead? Does she have the momentum at her back?
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for having me, and it's great to be with my friend Garland. I think the race is tied. I've crisscrossed Pennsylvania from Philadelphia to Erie and everywhere in between, campaigning on behalf of Vice President Harris. And I can tell you, this is going to be a close race. And we have seen other close races in Pennsylvania. The last presidential race was decided by less than a percentage point. But I feel great about the field organization that the Harris team has put together. We've opened a record number of field offices across Pennsylvania. We are competing in counties that Democrats traditionally don't compete in, places like Cumberland County and Lancaster, having those real authentic conversations, meeting people where they are. And so I believe on Election Day, all of those efforts are going to pay real dividends when Kamala Harris and Tim Walz win Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're three Black men here on the TV, so we have to talk about President Obama's words there in Pittsburgh, and specifically focused on Black men and what he's been hearing from campaign offices and communities around the country about the lack of enthusiasm for the Harris candidacy. Lieutenant Governor Austin, what did you make of Obama's comments, and what are you hearing with regard to support from Black men?
Yeah, look, I think we first need to level set and recognize that Black men are one of the most loyal bases to the Democratic Party going back literally a generation. And so I suspect Black men are going to turn out in significant numbers to vote for Kamala Harris. But the reality is we need to continue to have authentic conversations. There are people who feel like the system has not worked for them. Mm-hmm. Particularly, many Black men have still felt like they've had to struggle, whether it's to gain generational wealth or economic success or educational success. And we need to have real conversations about how Kamala Harris is going to make their lives better. And the reality is the contrast could not be clearer in this race. Kamala Harris has worked every day since she's been our nominee to reach out to Black voters, to have authentic conversations, to put forward policy ideas that will lift up Black families. Donald Trump has ignored Black families, has denigrated them, and literally for the time he was president did not work to solve any of our problems. We saw gun violence out of control in black neighborhoods. We saw black businesses shuttered because of a pandemic that he let get out of control. And so I think we need to make sure that we're continuing to work to turn out every vote that we can. The question is not whether black men are going to show up for Kamala Harris, because they are. We need to maximize that turnout for Kamala Harris.
Right. Absolutely right. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, what did you make of President Obama's words, and what are you hearing from black men in Michigan?
I mean, we got to take a step back here. So when you think about what it takes to mobilize any community, but especially black men, like I was one of those young black men in and around the city of Detroit where my community believed in me and believed in my potential. It helped me to encourage me to start a business, to create jobs and solve problems, helped me to get my education as an engineer. Like believing in that potential and power is how we motivate, because black men want to be able to build wealth for their communities. And I can tell a concrete example, a story of working with Kamala Harris and the Biden-Harris administration to be able to build health and wealth through a program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. That the state of Michigan, I applied these resources to create a new fund that invests in black entrepreneurs and other disadvantaged entrepreneurs, a $10 million fund focused specifically on them. You contrast that with Donald Trump, who a judge appointed cut the Minority Business Development Agency and to cut the pathway to black wealth for so many people. So this new president in Kamala Harris, she's going to be one that's on our team, and that's why black men are going to turn out for her.
This has been a great conversation, and I am so thankful to both of you for coming to the Saturday show. Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist and Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. Thank you both very much.
Thanks for having us.
For having me.
And coming up, Vice President Harris releases a doctor's summary of her medical history, what it says about her physical and mental fitness to be president, and what we don't know about Donald Trump's health. Plus, Broadway rallies for Kamala Harris with live performances by stars of the stage and screen in an online event Monday night. Award-winning actor, singer, and producer Billy Porter joins me later with a preview, and he's got a message for undecided voters.
Undecided about what? Undecided about what? That's all I'm gonna say.
The biggest savings event of the year continues this holiday weekend at More Furniture. Join us as we celebrate with unbelievable discounts on fall arrivals for every room in your home. Visit your local showroom and get our very best offer when you pay no money down, subtract the tax, and pay absolutely no interest until January 2026. You'll also get free white glove delivery, and we'll remove and donate your gently used pieces locally. Hurry into your local showroom today for the best selection.
When the details take precedence and each piece is crafted with tension, the rest falls perfectly into place. We strip away everything but the essential, finding sophistication in simplicity. And what we're left with are thoughtful bedrooms for modern living. Thuma.
You want customers to know they can trust your business, that their information is safe with you. And to prove it, you need one of these. Thankfully, there's Vanta. Vanta integrates with the tools you already use, from cloud providers to task trackers, to automate the tedious process of gathering the evidence needed to